Hello, ladies. Welcome to Women and Blended Families, where we want to help you build strong relationships in your blended family. I'm Gayla Grace. I serve on the Family Life Blended team, and I'm excited to have you joining me today, whether you are live with us or you are watching the replay. Welcome. You are going to love our guest today, Kathi Lipp. I like to refer to her as the queen of decluttering. And we will talk about that some more, whether you're decluttering at home. She can also help us declutter our relationships. And if you are with me live on that subject, I would love for you to answer a question in the comments. Tell me where you're from, and then tell me, do you like to declutter? Or do you just prefer to let things be? I'm curious how you would answer that question. And while we're waiting for women to come on, be sure to tag a friend who you know could benefit from our conversation, even if they can't join us now. They can always watch the recorded version later. And then if you've watched us before, you know that you can put questions in the comments and we will answer as many of those live as we can. And I want to give a quick reminder to you about an upcoming event, Blended and Blessed, that we are doing this Saturday, and the live stream is free. I want to encourage you to join us. Our theme this year is Hope for the Journey for your blended family. My guest today, Kathi Lipp, will be a speaker at the event, along with Ron Deal, myself, Cheryl Shoemake, and Davey Blackburn. You do not want to miss it. Go to blendedandblessed.com and get registered and join us on Saturday. It's going to be a great event. All right, let's meet our guest as I look at who is joining us today. Florida, Texas, New York, Alabama. Yes, we've got ladies tuning in from several places already. And one of them says, I love to declutter, but I need more time. Yeah, that's the thing. Decluttering takes some time, doesn't it? So continue to give me your comments. I'm so curious who likes to declutter. All right, let's meet our guest, Kathi Lipp. Kathi is a national speaker. She's author of more than 20 books, including But I'm Not a Wicked Stepmom, one of my favorite books. And she's host of the popular Clutter-Free Academy podcast. She and her husband, Roger, have been married for over 20 years. Kathy's a mom and a stepmom to their 4 children. They're all adults now, and they live on their red house mini homestead with their 9-pound dog Moose and a bunch of mangy chickens. Welcome, Kathi.
Kayla, it's so great to be back with you. Thank you so much. I am so excited about today's topic.
Well, it's going to be very unique for us to make some parallels between decluttering a home and decluttering our relationships. And I look forward to seeing you in person at Blended and Blessed in just a couple of days, Kathi. So give me a little Reader's Digest version of the keynote that you're giving at that event.
Yeah, I think a lot of the step parenting advice I got when I was new to this was from other people who were kind of in the trenches with me. We are 20 years in, our kids are adults, and I felt like we were doing this big social experiment. What if we put our marriage first? Did that mean that we were not doing right by our kids? And we've had 20 years to figure it out. And I just want to share some of the things that we learned. The talk is called Choose Us, Love Them, because the most loving thing we could do for our kids was choose to invest in our marriage.
Absolutely.
And boy, it has paid off in dividends. So I'm so excited about, because I've never heard anybody really talk about this in this way. So I'm very excited about it.
Well, there's naturally this tension when you come in and you're a biological parent because you have more history with your biological kids than you do that marriage. And yes, I'm excited to hear that. That sounds very helpful for those in blended families. But today we are talking about decluttering. So now, Kathi, I have to assume that you like to declutter, right?
I've learned to love the outcome.
Okay.
But I will say I am not a naturally decluttered person. A little bit of my background is my dad was a hoarder. And
really?
yeah. So I did not really learn how to do any of this. And so I would say in our relationship, Roger is naturally a little bit more clutter free than I am. So I'm coming from the approach of hard won battles and going against my natural instincts to like want to hang on to things. And uh,
Wow.
but I love the results. And so
Yes.
that's why I've learned to do it.
Okay, well, let's talk about those results. And first, we'll just talk about if we're talking about decluttering our home, and then we're going to
Mhm.
move that into applying it to decluttering our relationships because I think they kind
Yeah,
of go hand in hand. But what are the advantages
absolutely.
of decluttering our home? Let's just start there.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I would say is and this is gonna sound so funny, less to trip over. I mean, the physical and, that also goes for our relationships, but I I know that when a house is cluttered, we can trip physically and we can trip mentally. Because if you have a lot of clutter around you, what's happening is your brain is literally pinging on those items. And so it's very hard to feel at peace. It's very hard to feel settled when
Mm,
there is clutter because you're looking at that pile of mail and you're saying, "Oh, I need to pay attention to that." Or the dishes and, "Oh, I need to pay attention to that." Or the broom leaning, I need to so your brain cannot rest because there are so many things to pay attention to. And decluttering says, "Hey, we've closed that loop. You don't need to worry about that right now. You may need to deal with it in a day or 5 days, but right now you can rest, you can be at peace, and that is such a gift."
yeah, that's good. And what you're saying is when we declutter, we remove things that don't need to belong there anymore.
Right,
And
absolutely.
it allows us to have more space. So let's relate
Yes.
that to decluttering our relationship. Sometimes we need to remove things that
Yeah.
are unhealthy so that healthy connections can grow. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Like physical clutter and emotional clutter share the same root.
Mm,
We've held on to things past their usefulness.
right.
And we can be afraid that letting go of them means that we failed. Like
Mhm.
if I'm hanging on to things that that craft project I never finished. Well, then I don't get a check mark, I get a minus.
Mm,
And it can be the same in our emotional relationships. If I'm holding on to, I'm trying to make things work in a relationship that doesn't really need to be there,
mhm.
that can be that emotional clutter that doesn't work. And we know that decluttering isn't about throwing everything out. It's about being intentional about what stays. And I think that
Yes.
that can be really healthy in our step parenting journey because there are a lot of things I have in my relationship with my biological kids that I don't have with my
Mm,
stepkids.
mhm,
And when I was trying to force that, it wasn't good for either of us. And now we know the roles that we are playing
mhm.
and we have peace in those relationships.
Yeah, and some of that I think comes down to having realistic expectations. So, if
Yeah.
we are a biological parent and a step parent, we in the beginning think that those relationships should be the same. I should be
Yeah.
able to treat my stepchild the exact same way or have the same feelings. We do want to be fair. We do want to
Right.
treat them the same way, but our feelings are going to be different. So, some of decluttering those relationships might have to do with letting go of some unrealistic expectations. I think you listed one right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love researcher Patricia Paper now.
Mhm,
Yeah, I'm sure you guys quote her all the time. But if somebody had told me that it's going to take 4 to 7 years to blend my family, which is what research shows,
right.
I I why did we all keep that a secret? Like it is where the unrealistic expectation came because I don't know about you, Gayla, but I grew up watching the Brady Bunch, and
Yes.
there was never an adjustment time.
Yeah.
Like there was one episode where there are no steps in this family, where Carol's talking to Bobby. I just thought we were going to mesh. And of course, it was going to be a little hard, but we were going to overcome because we love each other, and it's going to be no, it's hard.
Mhm.
And to try to present to the world that you're okay when you're not, especially
Right.
as Christians, those expectations aren't just from each other. They're not just from our kids. It's from the world, and it's from the church. And we're forcing
Yes.
things that don't need to be forced.
Mhm. Yes. So that's one of those things that we need to let go of. I've
Yeah.
also heard you talk about you had this idea of I must be the perfect stepmom. That
Mm.
was an expectation that I would think you had to let go of at some point, right?
Yeah, this is one of those places where trying harder doesn't always pay off.
Yes.
And one of the things I had to really figure out is not only did I need space in this new situation, but my stepkids
Mhm.
and my kids with Roger, we all needed space. So, something we learned, I would say at year 3, is we didn't have to do everything all together as 6 people.
Right.
We finally just said, "Hey, you and your kids love to do X, Y, and Z. You love to go hiking, you love to go camping. My kids, we love to go to movies. We love to do all those kind of things." And to be able to say, sometimes just being with your family of origin gives you a place to just relax
Right, and feel safe. Mhm.
and feel safe. Yes.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
the expectation that everything has to be done together all the time is what puts pressure and feels forced. And so when we say, yeah, sometimes we do something, all 6 of us, but like we would go to Disneyland every once in a while. But then sometimes me and my kids, I remember one trip where my daughter's like, I am peopled out. And so we just planned for a day where she and I just hung out in the hotel room. We went out to it was okay that we weren't doing everything together all the
Right.
time.
Yes, and it's actually advantageous for the biological kids to have some one-on-one time with their biological parent, and I
Yeah.
think what goes against that is that we think, "Well, how's the step-parent gonna develop their relationship if they're not with them?" But sometimes that actually backfires on us a little bit when they need some space with their biological parent and not always have to have the step-parent around. Yeah.
Absolutely. And let's also, make sure that we understand sometimes we need to figure out what role exactly we're playing
Mm,
in a lot of it will depend on what time in their life that you came into their life, what role do they need, what is their relationship with their other biological parent, like all of these things factor in. And I am a big part of my stepkids lives, but
uh-huh.
I had to figure out that role and they had to figure it out.
Right. Yeah, it goes both ways. Yeah, absolutely, Kathy. So I've had a question come in that says, "How do I declutter my 7 years of hurt from step kids?"
Mm.
I was going to reference at that sometimes there is some hurt that we are
Oh.
struggling to let go of, but we need to let go of it in order for these relationships to move forward. So, how do we do that?
Oh, okay. So just, we have figured this out now, and I'm good friends with my stepkids. This was not always our story.
Yeah.
My stepson was a protester at our wedding.
Oh
And oh,
no.
yeah. Oh, my goodness. He hated me.
Oh
And
no,
oh,
Kathy. I
oh,
haven't
yeah.
heard this.
Oh, yeah. The only way he'd come to our wedding gala is if he could bring his mom. So let me just say, at
Roger's ex-spouse is at your wedding.
yeah. We didn't know what we were doing. There were 3 books on step parenting when we
Oh,
got
I
there.
know.
Like we didn't know. And so and the reason that he moved out of the house is one night Roger and I were downstairs and we were talking and Jeremy came through the front door and I said, "Hey, Jer." And he ignored me and he walked upstairs and Roger went upstairs and said, "Hey, that is not how we're going to treat Kathi." And so then I saw him walking downstairs with big, giant Glad bags. And I said, "I think Jer's moving out." And he was.
Oh
And
my
so
g
I can laugh about it now,
Yeah.
but, to the person who asked the question, it was so hurtful at the time.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
here would be just, and Gayla, I know you have better advice than me, but I will tell you what helped me was I took a break
Mhm.
from being in day-to-day relationship
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
Jeremy,
Mhm.
and Roger was the one who
Yeah.
said, "Hey, um, buddy, I love you, and I know that there are some things going on in your life that are hurting right now, but taking it out on Kathi is not one of your options.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so you and I can talk." I think therapy is an underutilized
Uh-huh.
resource in
I
blended
w
families.
I was gonna mention that also. Yes,
Yes.
I
You
agree.
know, instead of saving up for, to pay a full ride for college, hey, maybe we need a student loan and some deep therapy.
Oh,
Um, because I just know that so much of this is temporary, but
mhm.
it feels like it's gonna be forever. And
Right.
so if you could get past some of these things, and also that hurt, uh, I think some of my initial hurt came from, like we were talking about, unrealistic expectations, because
Right.
everybody in my life likes me. Like, of course you're going to like me, but
Right.
I don't understand the triangulation that happens, all of that.
Mhm.
What's the original, the other parent saying? There's so much that goes into it that is not necessarily in the child's control. And
Mhm.
so we have to be giving a lot of grace,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we have to be taking care of our emotional and spiritual health in the midst of all of this.
Yes. I agree 100%. And to the person who sent this in, I just wanna say I'm sorry for your hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is, painful oftentimes. The step-parent role can be very painful.
Yeah.
And there are things that we can do. I believe in therapy. I've been to therapy to help
Mhm.
with issues in my step family, and also talking to other people besides our spouse on issues like this.
Yes.
With when it involves their children, it can be
Mhm.
super sensitive, and
Yeah.
that may not be the person that you go to. So
Right.
I agree with what you're saying, Kathy. Boundaries are another thing that can definitely help to figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and don't
Mm.
carry the weight of continuing to perhaps do more than you need to do as a stepmom in the relationship. But I
Right.
pray about what you need, and the consider some of the things that we have mentioned, because
Mm.
sadly hurt can be a part of the
Abs
stepmom relationship, and we
Yeah.
don't want to negate that. And just want to say, get the help you need, because you
Mhm.
can find peace and freedom from that in the long term.
Yeah.
All right, Kathy, were you going to say anything else on that?
I was just gonna say, that your role as a stepmom doesn't have to look like other stepmom roles.
Oh, that's good.
It
Yes.
it can be as small as it needs to be for the situation required, or as large.
Right.
And there may be seasons
Mhm.
where you're gonna
Mhm.
be in more contact or less contact.
Right.
But also, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying about your spouse doesn't need to hear every single complaint,
Mhm.
and also let them be the interface for that, but get in relationship with some other stepmoms,
Mhm.
because you're going to start to really understand. It may look great from the outside, but it may there's a lot of hurt that can be under that.
Mhm.
This is
Mhm.
the issue that I've cried the most tears over, and those tears were the first 3 years.
Right.
I There were tears a lot, but
Mhm.
I also know that there can be healing.
There can be healing, and I
Mhm.
agree with what you're saying. In There's seasons to this, and there were seasons that I
Mhm.
was more involved with my stepchildren than other
Right.
seasons. And yeah, there is hope, though. Just because maybe you're in
Yeah.
a season where it feels hopeless, there is hope, and things can change. So I've had another question: is it my
Yeah.
responsibility if the stepkids don't respond to my husband about this? He sees it as disrespect. I think it
Mhm.
needs time. How would you handle this conversation with my spouse?
Uh, okay, I have a couple of thoughts on this. One, again, it might be a good idea to have a counselor there to
Mhm.
help you with this conversation because this is your first time being a blended family.
Mhm.
And or if it's not a counselor, maybe it's another couple that you really trust.
Right, a
And
trusted friend. Mhm.
yes. And I know that, Roger is not like an authoritarian, but there were times he had to say, "Hey, we're not going to behave that way."
Mm,
And so I think understanding, yes, respect is important, but also time, and your kids are grieving, your stepkids are grieving what they thought that they had or what they hoped that they had. And so there's this combination of making sure that you're respected because he loves you.
mhm,
He's crazy about you. He broke open his whole life so that he could be married to you. And
mhm.
so of course he wants that respect for his kids. But depending on their age, that may be really tough. And there may be this illusion of respect without actual respect. And so giving it some space, giving it some time to be able to grow into a smaller relationship that is different than
Right.
what you first expected is really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree and don't have anything else to add to that. So, yeah, thank you for kind of giving that input. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little more about decluttering in our
Yeah.
relationship. So, when
Yeah.
we declutter in the home, we have to be intentional. I mean, it's not just going to happen. You have to find time for it. Sometimes it
Mhm.
takes more time than you want,
Yeah.
and you have to be intentional. So, I think it's
Mm.
the same thing in
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, talk to
So
me about some parallels there.
okay, so I think that what a lot of us try to do in decluttering our homes is we go in without a plan. We're like, "Oh, okay." Or we go in and we say, "Today is the day we're going to declutter the whole house." And the expectations are unrealistic, it's exhausting, you may end up in tears. And
Right.
I think to be able to look at whether it's your home decluttering or decluttering those emotions that are no longer serving you, to
Mhm.
take the long look at this. The Gottman Institute shows that most relationship conflicts, about 70% are perpetual, meaning they're never fully going to resolve.
Yes.
And so this just means you have to live alongside of those conflicts.
Mhm.
And there are ways to make them healthier and better, but you're probably not going to eliminate them. And so to say, hey, we're going to work a little bit every day, we're going to do one thing that is going to be healthy. What are some things that we can do that are going to build us as a blended family? And sometimes that's going to be all of you together. Sometimes it's going to be me with the children I gave birth to. And sometimes it's going to be me with my stepkids. And so, like, one of the things that has become really important in my relationship with Jeremy is he loves to cook. That is not something that Roger or his mom are passionate about, but I've got the inside scoop. And so anytime that Jeremy is coming to our house, I am making sure we're going to do ravioli. We're going to do pasta from scratch. We're going to learn how to
Wow.
do yeah, I'm buying the groceries for the way too expensive steak because that's what he wants to cook.
Right.
So, it's finding your pockets where you can build trust and communication. Like,
Mhm.
to be able to text him, and we have whole text chains about food. And would I like to go deeper? Sure. But you know what? This is where he feels safe, he feels comfortable, and he's excited to come hang out with me. We can talk about steak all day long. And
Yeah.
so I think understanding that we don't want to do everything all at once, that
Yes.
we're taking the long term. And I also know that if I can just show up as a faithful, encouraging, trusted cheerleader in
Mhm.
my stepkid's life, I'm going to be invited into more spaces. I got to go wedding dress shopping with my
Oh.
stepdaughter, and so did
Oh.
my daughter, and
Wow.
I'm like, she didn't have to do that, and I would have
Right.
understood if that wasn't the space, but this comes from 20 years
Uh-huh. Yes.
of sowing those seeds. And we don't all get the same payoffs, but
Mhm.
you're never going to regret treating your stepkids in a Christ-like manner. You
Yes.
don't get to determine what the outcome is, but you're never going to regret that.
Right. And every child responds differently. Those
Yes.
relationships with our kids and stepkids are different. One
Yeah.
stepchild might be very willing to have a relationship with us, and the other one isn't. Some of it can be
Mhm.
driven by age or by
Yeah.
male or female or so
Mm.
many different things. But
Yeah.
we can overthink it and try to figure out, well, why does one stepchild like me and the other one doesn't?
Mm.
And we will never figure it out.
Never.
And just accept that there are gonna be differences in these relationships. And what you said, Kathy, that I completely agree with is finding things you have in common with them. And
Yeah.
then and even if you don't have in common with them, see what you can learn from them and engage in whatever it is that kinda makes them tick, even if it
Yeah.
doesn't make you tick. I mean,
Right.
sometimes that is helpful. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things that I did for a long time, and I don't have to do it anymore, I kept a little index card in my nightstand. And when they would drop the name of a friend,
Mhm.
or maybe they were dating somebody new, I would just write down that name and circle back and just say, "Hey, how are things going with Jamie?" Or, "I hear that you and Claire hung out last week. Did you guys do anything fun?" And it was just this, I'm interested in you
Mm.
because I love you.
Right.
And I care about, like what you just said, I care about the things you care about, the
Mm.
people you care about. And I would sometimes hear things, I'm like, "Oh, is that the best relationship for you to be?" I do not say a word. You know what? It's more effective for me to pray and
Yes.
either, change my heart, whatever needs to happen there. And to just say, "I care about you." And I'm only going to care about you in the healthiest ways. I'm not going to be caring about you in ways that are dysfunctional or
Mhm.
unhealthy. But you are never going to question whether I love and am invested in your best outcome.
Yeah, and, I have a friend who she is really good at she's a gift giver. That's her
Mm.
natural thing is to give gifts, and I've noticed that when she hears one of her kids mention something that they want, she'll write it down. She must keep a Christmas list going all year long because she gives the best gifts at Christmas, and it's
Mm.
because she has paid attention
Yeah.
all year. And,
Right.
those are the things that and Kathy, you have 4, we have
Mhm.
5.
Yeah.
Keeping up with everybody gets to be overwhelming, and we do
Yes.
need to write it down sometimes.
Mhm.
And, but then if we get to that point and we need some help, we can also ask our stepkids, "Hey, I know your birthday's coming up. I want to be able to gift you with something that is meaningful to you."
Mhm.
And sometimes we try things and they may or may not work. Like if your stepdaughter likes to get pedicures, then you go get a pedicure together. But
Right.
don't do that if they don't care about what their nails look like. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to invite them into your world as much as you
Right.
want to ask for entry into their world. And yeah, if they are into, like, both of our girls love a massage, and so it's my way of saying, "Hey, we're all going to go get massages and we're going to have brunch or lunch afterwards, and I get to hang with them in a different way than all of us hanging together."
Yeah.
And we do this all the time where we invest in some 2-on-1, so, or 2-on-2, if the our child is coupled up. But we meet my son, we live about 3 hours apart. We meet in the middle for movies. Roger and I will meet up with him, and it makes them feel seen and
Mhm.
known. And
Yes.
that's what they're looking for from their parents.
Yes. And from their step parents. to be
Yes.
seen and known,
Yeah.
absolutely. Kathy, another thing as I think about decluttering these emotions, I think about sometimes we need to intentionally choose forgiveness. And
Mm,
it may not happen naturally when we have been hurt, but
yeah.
forgiveness and offering grace instead of always having to dissect a conversation or confront about something, sometimes grace goes a long way in step parent relationships.
It was so interesting. My husband works with a team internationally, and somebody on that international team used a word that we in the United States would not use.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and so I won't be saying it here, but so somebody on Roger's team came to him and said, "Is it okay if I have a conversation?" Not to make them feel bad, but just saying, "Hey, just for future information, in the United States, that's a word that's going to have a very different meaning, and you just might want to be aware of that." And this person also said, "And if you ever find me using a word that could be offensive in your culture, would you please let me know? Because the last thing, but we have to, and Roger will say, hey, 80% of it is communication and
Mhm,
20% of it is grace,
mhm.
because just the way that they communicate, the way we communicate is different. And
Right,
when you've grown up in a different family and you have different inside jokes or different things that are important to you, I think about the last person who asked a question, respect is probably really, really, really important to her husband.
right,
And
right.
she's saying, you know what? They're being kids. And
Mm,
yes, if this was a family of four and we had them since birth, we would be having a different conversation. But we allow grace because
mhm,
of what those kids have gone through, what we've gone through, what they need.
mhm.
And that grace and space, I think, are both, those are the cross pins of what our kids needs. And it's not to allow harm or and I've been that stepmom who has been so hurt.
Yes,
And I
me
did have
too.
a safe
Mhm,
husband to talk to it about,
mhm.
but I also had a couple of safe friends.
Yes,
And I look back at it now, they didn't hate me, they hated the situation.
right. Mhm,
And,
mhm.
they probably, if you had asked them at the time, they may have said that they hated me, but they hated because,
Yeah,
they wanted their parents to be back together. My kids
absolutely.
wanted us
Mhm.
to be back together, and
Right.
it was painful at the time. And now we are just richer for being a blended family.
Oh, I
We really
love
are.
that. Yes, and I also think that as we walk through those challenges, God grows us up
Mm,
sometimes in,
yes.
through difficulties and things that we don't want to deal with, and ultimately we go to Him, asking for help and grow spiritually during situations like that in another way,
Yeah.
yeah.
I one of the skills I had to learn as a young blended family mom was to be unoffendable.
Yes.
And there's so much scripture about not being offended.
Mhm.
And why did God put that in? I think specifically for step parents because it because we would never speak to our parents that way. We would never act around our parents that way. Our kids, blah, blah, blah. And then we get this stepchild.
Right.
And it's so easy to be
Mhm.
offended. And I was offended.
Mhm.
And there were some things that if you just read them on a page or, saw the film of them, you're like, yeah, I could see why you'd be offended. And I just need to raise my own bar for
Mhm.
being inoffendable.
Mhm. Yes. And that is so true and something that we need to consider because it is easy to get offended
Mhm.
as stepmoms, and we do sometimes misinterpret things the wrong way, and then we
Yeah,
end up being offended. And the other thing that I had to learn, Kathy, was to consider the transitions that my stepkids are going through. The road that they are on is also
yeah.
hard, not just my road.
Mm,
And too
yeah.
often, I was too quick to look at what my road looked like.
Yeah.
instead of considering the place that my stepchildren and even my biological children were in and how they were reacting out of that place. And
Right.
when
Oh,
we can see it from that
yeah.
viewpoint, it helps us offer them grace and forgiveness.
That is such a great point because we as adults have way more choices
Mhm.
in this situation than our stepkids do.
We're making the choices. We're
Yes.
getting married. Yes. Uh-huh.
Exactly. And do they get to choose which house they're staying at
Right.
and what clothes they have at that house and who they're hanging out with? Like I get to have so many more choices and I have more resources.
Yes.
I have other friends who have been through this.
Mhm.
I can do the research. And so while they're changing and growing quickly, they have changing and growing as a human being,
Right.
plus as the child of a blended family. It's a lot. It's
It's
a
a
lot.
lot. I
Yeah,
mean, just going through puberty itself is so much, and when you're doing
right.
that and you're in a blended family, it just it can be too much, and we need to
Yeah.
recognize that. Is there anything else, Kathy? What have we left out about decluttering these emotions or things in relationships? Anything
I
else you
think
think?
I think the other thing I would say is unresolved tension
Oh,
is
yeah.
a lot of the clutter to be able to say, to maybe first have that conversation with your spouse.
Mhm,
And if that is fraught, then get into counseling or get with a mentor couple.
mhm.
But unaddressed tension never disappears.
It
It's
doesn't.
like clutter, it just accumulates. It's like
Uh-huh.
that pile of mail you've been avoiding,
Yes.
right? And
Mhm.
those bills don't go away, they just get late payments or interest payments or whatever that is.
Right.
So, having those hard conversations, uh, actually increases anxiety and you don't want you don't need to have a conversation about everything.
Yeah.
I would say those little things, it's good to have, those small conversations instead of letting everything build up, and then to ask for input.
Mhm.
Uh, you said that you don't like how I cook. Okay, knife to the heart, right?
Right!
Um, so, is there a recipe you'd like me to try? Is there something you would like me to do differently? I'm not giving you control, but I am
Mhm.
asking you for input.
Yeah.
And so I would love some input. I think to be able to say, I think there's some tension between us around blank. Can we talk about it? Is something, you're inviting them into conversation. You're not saying you're doing this wrong, but saying, I want to be a part of s- solving this together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm gonna throw out a phrase that I just heard this week with somebody who's
Mhm.
dealing with some hard issues in a step family, and they had a counselor tell them that reflection without expression leads to depression, anxiety, or explosion. There's
Ooh,
a lot in there, isn't there?
yes. Reflection without
Expression. So if you don't talk
expression.
about it, if you're just pushing it down,
Ah,
and
yes.
that's gonna lead to depression, anxiety, or explosion. You're just out of control. Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
so good.
I know, I thought
Yes.
so too, yeah. All right, Kathy, thank you for joining me. If ladies want to
Mm.
follow you, where do they find you?
There are a couple of different places, but my favorite place for people to hang out with me is at Kathi Lipp's Clutter Free Academy on Facebook. It's a free group. We have like 16,000 women in there who are
Wow.
all dealing with their clutter, and it's a gentle, friendly place on the internet. So all you have to do is search for Clutter Free Academy on Facebook. We would love to have you in there.
I love that. I think anybody can use help dealing with clutter. I mean, honestly,
Yes.
it
All
doesn't
of
just
us.
go away. Yeah, so
Yeah.
thank you, Kathy, and I do look forward to seeing you again soon.
Gayla, I'll see you in a couple of days.
Yes. Ladies, we will be back with Women in Blended Families on May the 12th. I'm looking forward to my conversation with Heather Hetchler. Our topic next month is finding your place when you feel unseen or uncertain. Heather is a mom and a stepmom with 6 children in her family. They're all grown now, and she has some great advice to help us when we're struggling to belong or feel unseen or carry uncertainty in our family. So make plans now to join us. And then be sure to follow our social media channels. You'll be the first one to hear about new podcasts, live events, or other helpful resources. And you can find all of our live streams on our YouTube channel. And as I close, I want to encourage you as you seek to declutter the emotions in your relationships that have unhealthy patterns, start by asking for God's help. Ephesians 3:20 tells us that he is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. Keep pressing on, ladies. I look forward to seeing you next time.